Years back, when I had to speak about Iran, I was faced with a problem because no one happened to know anything about Iran, so I didn't know where to start from. Today, I have been a different challenge because everyone is expert on Iran. Everyone knows everything about Iran. So what can I add to your wisdom this morning? So as a good history student, I tried to my best to get away a bit from the current developments and put them in a wider perspective, which I happen to think is the more appropriate perspective of viewing the developments in Iran. Since coming to power, the Iranian Revolution, like any other revolutionary movement, had two main aims in mind. Whenever you take power, you usually have two main aims. One, you take power, you want to maintain in power. If this was the aim of the Islamic Revolution, 30 years after, they have been pretty well successful. 30 years after, they are still in power. I don't know what will happen tomorrow, but so far, there is a degree of stability in the institutions of the revolution. But revolutions don't come to power simply to replace one government with another. They come with the aim of proving that their doctrine contains the cure to the malaise of society. They come with a promise to elevate the life of people and communities. And if this was the aim of the Iranian Islamic Revolution, I think the revolution has so far been much less than successful. But before going on, I want to raise three questions that I believe are the most important in understanding the Islamic Revolution in Iran or the whole phenomenon of Islamic radicalism. The first question, today we speak about Islamic Revolution, Islamic Republic, Islamic terrorism, everything is Islamic. So my question would be, what is Islamic about this new trend of revolutionary political movement that we see in Muslim worlds? It depends much on your definition of what is religion and what is Islam. If you use Western terminology, which distinguish between religion and state, religion and science, religion and so many other things, the Islamic Revolution was not religious. It was social, economic, political, cultural, anti-imperialist. According to Islamic terminology and Jewish terminology, in which religion covers all spheres of life, this was Islamic. I'll put it differently. I lived in Iran the last 2 years of the Shah's rule doing research at Tehran University. Had I been Iranian citizen in 1979, I might have been with Ayatollah Khomeini. Not because of religion and not because of Islam. I'm not terribly religious, certainly not Muslim, but because life was miserable and people were looking for hope. Khomeini provided the hope, if you want 30 years after to say the illusion that he will bring them to greater success. In many ways, people who joined Ayatollah Khomeini, including leftist, communist, liberal intellectuals, did not support Khomeini to create a theocracy, a religious government, but rather to give them the hope that to bring better life for their children. If this analysis is correct, the final stability of the Islamic Revolution does not depend to the degree of return to Islam, but to a degree that this Islamic regime would be capable of easing the burden of the life of the Iranian people, and this so far has not happened. In terms of its roots, it was more a revolution that led to the Islamic government rather than Islamic revolution. The second question deals with the ideology of this revolution. To what degree the philosophy of this revolution is Islamic? Well, here we are faced with the question, what is Islam? What is Islamic philosophy? Is there only one ideology that we can call this is Islam? Well, probably yes. This is the Islam with which the Prophet Muhammad came in the 7th century. There is one Islam. But we don't live today as Muslims as Islam used to be in the 7th century, as much as Judaism today is not exactly what it used to be 3,000 years ago, and Christianity is not exactly what it used to be 2,000 years ago. We live today according to our interpretation in our era of the principles of faith, and our interpretations tend to vary from generation to generation, sometimes from place to place. I'll give you an example. When Khomeini came to power in 1979 with all this charisma and power, There have been 7 grand ayatollahs in Iran. None of them supported Khomeini. The most leading ayatollah in Iran, when Khomeini came victorious back from Paris to Tehran, the most leading ayatollah, the most learned and powerful ayatollah in Iran, went under house arrest until he passed away 7 years later. The most prominent ayatollah in Iran today is under house arrest. The most prominent Shiite ayatollah in Iraq does not accept Khamenei and his philosophy. What we have a degree of pluralism within the world of Islam. What happened in the last generation is that Ayatollah Khomeini took a very radical interpretation of Islam that did exist on the margins of the Islamic establishment and brought it to center in Iran, influencing such movements as Hezbollah, Hamas, FIS, and other movements. To put it in the word of one of the leading Iranian intellectuals today, one of the supporters of Ayatollah Khomeini, who later on changes views about his revolution, Abdul Karim Soroush, that shuttles now between Princeton and Harvard, teaching there, he said the following sentence, that there is no one interpretation of Islam, there is no one interpretation that is better than the other, there is no final interpretation of Islam, and in a very courageous way he added, and there can be no official interpretation of Islam. By Islamic doctrine, even an Islamic regime cannot tell you this is the right interpretation. Why? Because that's what I say. There is no such thing in Islam. And I believe also in Judaism. There are different authorities who can interpret differently the principles of faith. What we are facing in this generation is a revolution in understanding of Islam rather than Islamic revolution. And the third question that brings us closer to what we speak today is to what degree the policy of Iran today is faithful with the ideology with which Khomeini came to power. And I think that what happened in Iran is exactly what happens in any ideological movement. When you are in opposition, you confess your philosophy, you tell what you want to do, there is no tax on promises, you promise everything, everything is wonderful, but when you come to power, you can only do what you can do. As the previous Prime Minister of Israel used to say when he was challenged by this, because of his unilateral withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, he said that what you see from here, you don't see it from there. What you see from the chair of the Prime Minister, you don't see it from the benches of the opposition. With authority comes responsibility. And even radicals, when they come to power, they tend to be more pragmatic. Well, I'll give you an example. According to Islamic philosophy, according to Khomeini doctrine, interest in the banking system is not legal. Wonderful. What do you do when you create your own government? You want the people to deposit their money in the bank, isn't it? If you don't give them some incentives, they are not stupid, they will buy carpets. What you do, you give them something, but you don't call it interest, God forbid, because it's forbidden. You call a leading Israeli bank, Orthodox Jewish bank, and say, well, how you Jews solve the problem? They found the same solution. They don't call it interest, they call it that you get benefit from your investment, which is legal, and that's way cheating God, and everything is okay, and God is smart enough to turn his eyes, because he wants life to go on. Religiously speaking, there is one big difference between interest and investment. And I think that some of you are businessmen, you certainly know. And the whole difference is one word, risk. The moment there is no risk on your capital, and the bank guarantees your capital and gives you 1%, 2% or whatever after 6 months of the year or a year, this is interest. But the government wants the people to put their money in the bank, so they don't call it interest. This is the pragmatism that I'm referring to. In each and every case that there was a clash between ideology and the interest of the system, interest won over ideology. To a degree that Ayatollah Khomeini, before he passed away, issued an important fatwa, the religious decree, stating that for the sake of the public interest, it's legal to destroy a mosque and suspend the 5 pillars of Islam. What else do you really need for this? Now, the question, how much you can retreat from dogma, in what's fair, in what path, there are differences of opinion within the Iranian society. There is no one way the Iranians look at politics. There are different attitudes, there is a degree of pluralism, and there are many, many groupings. Let me just refer to two main camps. The one that we call reformist, pragmatic, sometimes moderate, and the other one which is conservative, radical, extremist, whatever. Let me begin with the more pragmatic element. There are in Iran wonderful things happening since the Islamic Revolution in civil society. The Iranian newspapers are the most advanced and open than most of the countries of the Middle East. Women organizations in Iran are the most progressive and active in the Middle East. Student organizations in Iran are more active than the Israeli students. Use of internet is the most extensive in Iran that most of the countries, all the countries of the Middle East except Israel. Cinema industry in Iran is wonderful.
Within Iran or
within Iran, inside Iran. There is a lively civil society that you would be amazed what they are doing and how much they challenge the government. They put pictures of Ahmadinejad on fire in front of him when he visits any university in Iran. And you could see the sign 2 or 3 months ago after the elections. So no one is against civil society in Iran and the nice things going on in society. I'll give you a book published in Iran, by all of them by revolutionaries, supporters of Ayatollah Khomeini. The title was Fascist Interpretation of Islam, written by Abdi. It says that the Islamic regime is fascist. Of course he went to jail, but the book was published and sold in tens of editions in Tehran. Another intellectual, one of the most important thinkers in Iran, also in Harvard now, wrote a big essay claiming that the problem number one of Iran is the rule of the clergy. Well, and this was published in Tehran. It's the most leading Iranian newspaper. Of course he went to jail, but this has been published. And when I was speaking with a friend of mine, we meet in track two meetings with Iranian intellectuals for years, and I asked an Iranian professor how he would explain this dichotomy between suppression and free expression. He told me the following that I think opened my eyes. You know, they tell you there is no freedom of expression in Iran. That's not true. We have freedom of expression. What we don't have, however, is freedom after expression. So that's, I think, that explains this dichotomy in the Iranian society. They speak out, go to jail, and continue their struggle. And I think that you could see the nice face of Iran with this green movement in May and June, basically in June, 3-4 months ago. But the problem is that these nice young women and men don't have any say in how to run the state and the policy, or let alone in national security issues. In front of them, there are the radicals who carry all the authorities in the country. And they have 4 major advantages. First, they speak in the name of God. Well, it's wonderful when you raise up in the morning and tell people what God exactly wants, as though you have constant contact with him. Well, we have some of them in Jerusalem, so we know what it means, that people who claim to know exactly what is the will of God. And it carries a lot of weight in Iranian traditional religious society. If God is not enough, God forbid, because he should be enough, but if he's not enough, they have the military. So if you are a revolution, you have the will of God on one side, and the armed force and revolutionary guards on the other side, you are pretty safe. And the third element of strength is that they are determined to fight for their power. And we could see it again 3 months ago. They did not take power to concede power voluntarily. And they are determined, they say it very clearly, we are not going to let the opposition to do to us what we did to the Shah. And to quote the mentor of Ahmadinejad, Ayatollah Misbah Yazdi, he said very openly and clearly the following statement: whoever thinks that Islam is religion of mercy does not understand what is Islam. Islam dictates to us to take sharp sword and cut the heads and tongues of people who speak and act against us. I think that what we have seen in the last 2 months is a major change in Iranian society. We could see the nicer face of Iran and the suppressing face of Iran simultaneously. But I think that Iran, after the presidential elections, is not anymore the Iran that we have known. That this regime has lost its legitimacy in the minds of Iranian people themselves. When people go to the street and say death to dictator, and it does not only refer to Ahmadinejad, it refers also to Khamenei. Khamenei did not follow Ayatollah Khomeini. Khomeini always, when there are conflicts within society, he stood above the factions and did not identify with one of them against the other. Khamenei brought himself down to a position of a small political actor in the field, identifying himself with Ahmadinejad. The reformists on their side, they have their own weaknesses. They don't have a cohesive ideological alternative ideology. They don't have organization. They don't have charismatic leadership. And there are many lacunae, many shortcomings to present the challenge. Now, one word about this Iranian challenge and to us and how it's been viewed in Iran or in Israel. My views are not totally the views of the Israeli government, although I think that the Israeli government also changed its views recently because of the change in Obama. By the way, part of the reason that the Iranian students stood against their government is because of President Obama. Without President Obama in the White House, I could not see the Iranian young people in May and June going to the streets. But I'll put it differently. Wherever there is a Democratic president in the White House, be assured that there is going to be a revolution in Iran. It was in Harry Truman in 1951, Kennedy in 61, Carter in 78, and I don't know now what. The problem is when the students of Iran went going to the street and looking for Washington for support, Obama turns his eyes the other way. I can understand why, but I think it was disappointing for the young Iranians to lose the support of the men that they were looking at. By the way, the name Obama, written in Persian, means he is with us. And then after this, I saw a slogan saying, he is not with us. Obama nicht, he's nicht with us. So, but this is a side issue. What is the problem? The problem is that a country, a government with such a radical ideology, carrying weapon of mass destruction on the other hand, this is something that the free world cannot and should not tolerate. And they tell us, no, Iran is far away enemy. Iran is not far away enemy for Israel. It's all over the borders of Israel, in the Hezbollah in the north, Hamas in the south, and Islamic Jihad in the west. And maybe also with groups within the Israeli country, Israel itself. Iran going nuclear means that Egypt will be nuclear, Turkey will be nuclear, Saudi Arabia and other countries. This region is already a madhouse without all kind of nuclear capabilities in the hand of extremist or not extremist countries. What happens if there is nuclear power? And what's going to happen to the oil price if Iran is having nuclear power, without going into question of using or not using? Now let me conclude by what can be done. I will take off the table one option, in my view, that should be on the table, but I think should not be even mentioned, is the Israeli option. I don't think that every crazy thing in the world should have a problem, it should have a solution with a trademark made in Israel. This is a very big file with us. It's not exclusively the problem of Israel. Why should people expect that Israel should deal with these hot potatoes? Besides, why should Israel jump ahead of the line and always claim that we have the capabilities and the will to do it? One day they will tell us, okay, go and do the job. And that's what we are going to do. America is all over Iran. Saudi Arabia is concerned more than Israel. Egypt is concerned. Why we have to jump? And I always said for more than 10 years to our politicians, quoting a line from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, if you want to shoot, shoot, don't talk. We didn't threaten Iraq once before attacking in 1981. We didn't threaten Syria in December or September 2007. So why you have to threaten Iran? One day we might have to do it. But this should be on the table of the free world, because the problem is not exclusively, not even primarily the problem of Israel. 3 levels of solution. One is American-led solution. Dialogue is essential to begin with. And I supported dialogue long before Obama was candidate to the presidency. Not because I believe the dialogue would solve the problem. I don't believe the dialogue would solve the problem. I don't think that you can do anything against Iran without dialogue first. You have to speak to 2 nations. You have to speak to the Iranian people and to the American people who don't have the stomach to go to any other adventure unless they are sure that everything has been done short of real pressure on Iran. And mainly because I believe that the change will come from Iran. You have to bombard the Iranians with gestures of goodwill, chocolate, whatever, provided there is a deadline. And Iran does not continue with its nuclear program during this dialogue. Then the dialogue doesn't work, and I think it would not work. You can pressure Iran. Europe should use its moral muscles to pressure Iran. Where is the pressure on moral issues? On Iran. Well, I see them on Israel, but what about Iran? Look at the jails of Iran. That economically, Iran can be pressured. Iran is a country that can be pressured. And when it is pressured, it would change its policy. It has done it over the last 30 years. There is not even one single case in which they prefer their ideology over the survival of this regime. If they would understand that the survival of the regime depends on changing their policy, they will change their policy. The combination of bazaar merchants and clerics makes a good politician. They are not stupid, they are not willing to commit suicide. The second level is regional level. It takes you 2 minutes. The regional solution. The regional solution is that I said Israel is not the solution. Israel can be part of the solution. If Arab moderate countries together with Israel, we will be able to solve the Syrian problem, it will weaken Iran more than anything else that can think about it. Or there's one thing that can help even more, that we solve the Palestinian problem. Now, it is possible today? I'm not sure. But you ask me, how you weaken Iran? This is a major way, highway to weaken Iran, to solve the problem. So it's better for me that Saudi Arabia will not allow Israel a corridor to use its airplanes to attack Iran. If they want to attack, let them go and attack themselves. Don't give us corridors. If they establish diplomatic relations with Israel, this will be helpful to weaken Iran. And finally is the domestic solution. Iran is the only country in the Middle East which has two big popular revolutions in the 20th century. Iran is the only country in the Middle East which has a constitutional revolution. People went to the streets and brought constitution. Iranian people brought Ayatollah Khomeini, and Iranian people ultimately would change the policy of this regime or the regime. They have the aptitude to do it. They've done it before. And the degree of disillusionment and disenchantment within Iranian young people is the recipe for the next change. The problem is that we have two trends basically simultaneously going on. We have two, I would say, trains which have left the terminal. One is carrying the message of Iranian nuclear weapon, and the other is carrying the message of socio-political change. And unfortunately, the train with socio-political change is driving much slower than the train with the nuclear capabilities. And I'll stop here.